All right, well, welcome to our conversation on the Sermon on the Mount. Today we're looking at Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. And so before we get into those teachings, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been to the doctor for something weird? And by that I mean like something embarrassing, that you have going on, and you would rather not tell anybody or be honest with anyone, but you have to be honest with your doctor because you just want to get past it. Well, me neither, but I imagine in such a scenario that you would know that, well, you want to be healthy, so you got to be honest with someone because you want to be made well. Well, that's kind of what we're doing today. Jesus is going to offer us some teaching about our relationship with money. And that relationship with money for a Christian is often a tricky one, especially given the culture that we live in today. Jesus is teaching us here about what it means in the Sermon on the Mount to be in right relationship with the Lord. And if we want to be in right relationship with God, that means our other relationships need to be healthy as well. And so Jesus is going to make sure that the Christian, the follower of Christ, is going to have the right perspective about money in their life. And so part of what I want to encourage us to do today is to be honest with one another, because if there's something that needs to be diagnosed in our heart, that we would indeed be honest so that we can too be made well, even if it is embarrassing. So before we jump along to our teaching, I want you to stop and read Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24, and have some discussion together in your group about what you observe and what you feel like Jesus is teaching here. As we come back, I see there's really three questions that come out of the teachings here that Jesus is trying to hold in front of us to consider. And the first one comes out of verses 19 through 21, and Jesus is asking the question, what are you storing up? What are you storing up? Looking at your resources that you have and how you choose to use them, are you investing in this life or in the next? Now, before we speak to that question, I do want to just clear some things up. Jesus is not saying here that you shouldn't invest in your retirement or for your future, or that you shouldn't ever spend money on yourself or your family. That's not the case. In fact, the Bible calls us to, again, enjoy some of the resources God has given us, and also to be faithful in investing toward our future, but also to give generously to God's kingdom. So what Jesus is saying here is he is running a diagnostic test on our heart to determine what our treasure is. And in order to kind of do this, to give some perspective, I'm going to speak in a very general term about an example I saw recently, and we'll kind of look at it that way. I saw latest stats is that the American church, the average Christian in the American church, gives about 1% of their total income to what we might call kingdom purposes, be it church ministries or ministries that exist outside the church. 1%. To put that into some perspective, it's believed that in the Great Depression, the average Christian gave 14%. We're in the wealthiest economy we've ever had, and yet we give the least we've ever given. Now, I know this is a generality. It's not, speaking to each of our giving practices or whatever, but let's just play this one out. What does giving, what is using 99% of our resources to prop up this life have to say about our values? What does it say about what we treasure the most? Now, I want you to have some conversation around that. And just share your thoughts and what comes to mind for you, and especially in light of what Jesus is saying in verses 19 through 21. And we'll come back when you're done. The second question that Jesus is asking comes in verses 22 and 23. And Jesus is asking, where are you looking? Where are you looking? What are you fixing your eyes on? When I was taking driver's education course, our instructor said there's kind of this rule in driving that where you look, you tend to go. It's good advice for new drivers, right? It's this idea that if I look in a direction, you can believe that I'm going to probably begin to drift in that direction, if not move in that direction outright. And that's exactly what Jesus is saying here. Look, what you set your sights on is going to determine the direction for your life. If you set your sights on money and love of money and all the pictures of worldly success, and you can bet that you're going to, at best, drift in that direction, if not outright move completely in that direction, investing your money, your time, your energy, your gifts, everything in the pursuit of those things. And Jesus says such a life will be characterized by darkness, meaning that you've been deceived. Or we can begin to set our sights on the kingdom, loving and serving Christ. If our lives begin to move in this direction in alignment with his purposes, then our lives will be characterized by light, by abundance and joy, and the gifts that come from the life that Christ has opened up for us. Now, it's easy to look at that objectively here and talk about it. It's another thing when we look back into our own lives and where we are, and we know how the trappings of setting our sights on such things is so easy in our culture today. And so I want you to be honest in answering this question. What are you focusing on today? What are you setting your sights on today? Is it money or the worldly picture of success, or is it on the kingdom? I say that knowing it's not easy always to keep our focus on the kingdom. And so what are you setting your focus on today? You can come back, we'll have some more conversation. So the last question comes out of verse 24, and it's straightforward. It's, who are you serving? God or money? There's no mixing Jesus' words here. I mean, it says no one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So which one are you serving? Jesus uses the imagery of language around slavery here, and yet, though we may have the option of two masters here, we get to choose which one we will serve. To love money and serve it, or to love the Lord and serve him. It's your choice. Rather than answering that question, I have a practice that I think might help frame us as we think about our relationship with money, and how we can rightly be in a relationship with God and yet still be those who function around money in the world in which we live. And this comes out of a question that John Wesley would have his groups ask every week. And the question that they had to answer every week was, do I pray about the money I spend? Do I pray about the money I spend? I have a friend who does this, and who is, really one of the more generous people that I know. And if I'm going to pattern myself after someone in their generosity, it's going to be him. But the way he does this is, before he spends money, he asks the question this way, and think about this. He says, Lord, should I spend your money on this? Think about that. Lord, should I spend your money on this? Wow, what a way to frame our relationship with money. God, I know this is really yours. Like, am I using this faithfully? Imagine asking that before you pull into a Starbucks parking lot. Maybe that means you get the latte that day because God's like, hey man, this was a blessing and reward. Just enjoy it. Maybe it's, maybe I need to hold back on this expense. Find an outlet to be generous with it. I want to encourage us to try this practice in the week to come. Because I think doing this can do a lot to kind of expose where we are in our relationship, both with God and money, and also kind of frame our perspective on it. So I want to invite you to do this. For every time you buy something, ask, Lord, should I use your money on this? And I look forward to sharing the next week how that goes and our experiences with it. But let's be blessed as we continue to serve and seek the Lord in all we do. Amen.